My sister claims my mountain cabin chose her as its spiritual guardian, and my parents gave her $15,000 to sue me for it because I'm too spiritually bankrupt to own property. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Original post. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but I'm at my wit's end and need perspective from people who aren't involved in this situation. I'm James, 32M, and I work as a software engineer for a tech company in Denver. 3 years ago, after years of careful saving and investing, I purchased a small cabin in the mountains about 2 hours from the city. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom A-frame on 5 acres of forested land with a creek running through it. I bought it as a weekend retreat, a place to decompress from work, and honestly, as an investment for my future. The property wasn't cheap, but I'd been planning this purchase since I graduated college. My younger sister Sarah, 28F, has always been what I generously call unconventional. She dropped out of college after 2 years to find herself, which apparently involved bouncing between various wellness trends, meditation retreats, and self-proclaimed gurus. She's never held a steady job for more than 6 months, instead funding her lifestyle through a combination of our parents' money, crowdfunding for various spiritual projects, and selling overpriced crystals and essential oils online. Our parents, Robert, 61M, and Patricia, 59F, have always enabled Sarah's behavior. In their eyes, she can do no wrong. She's their free spirit, their enlightened child, while I'm apparently the boring materialistic son who sold his soul to corporate America. They're both retired teachers with comfortable pensions, and they've probably given Sarah close to $100,000 over the past decade for her various ventures and living expenses. The issue started 6 months ago when Sarah visited my cabin for the first time. I'd invited the family up for a weekend, thinking it would be nice to share the space with them. Big mistake. The moment Sarah stepped onto the property, she started going on about the energy of the land, how the trees were speaking to her, and how the creek had healing properties. I thought she was just being her usual dramatic self and didn't think much of it. But then she started making comments. "James, you don't even appreciate what you have here," she'd say while burning sage in my living room without asking. "This sacred space is wasted on someone who just comes here to stare at screens and disconnect from nature's wisdom." I tried to explain that I actually spend most of my time at the cabin hiking, reading, and yes, disconnecting from screens, but she just shook her head with this condescending smile. "You're here physically, but you're not present. You don't understand the spiritual significance of this land." Since that visit, she's become obsessed with my cabin. She texts me constantly with articles about land stewardship and sacred spaces. She sent me lengthy emails about how indigenous peoples, whom she's never actually consulted or learned from properly, would be heartbroken to see how I'm wasting the land's potential. Mind you, I maintain the property carefully, have planted native species, and installed a rainwater collection system. But apparently, because I'm not conducting daily meditation circles or building stone cairns, I'm somehow failing the land. Last month, she escalated. She called me and, in her most serious voice, announced that she'd had a vision during meditation. The land, she claimed, had chosen her as its true guardian. She went on for 40 minutes about how the universe was sending her signs that she needed to be the one living there, that her spiritual evolution had reached a point where she needed a sanctuary to do her healing work. When I laughed, not meanly, just out of sheer disbelief, she got angry. "This is exactly what I mean, James. You're so disconnected from your true self that you can't even recognize divine wisdom when it's presented to you. People like me, who have done the inner work, who have evolved beyond the material plane, we deserve these sacred spaces more than people who are spiritually bankrupt." I told her no, obviously. The cabin is mine. I paid for it, I maintain it, and I'm not giving it to her just because she thinks trees talk to her. She hung up on me. That should have been the end of it, but of course, she immediately called our parents. Within an hour, I was getting texts from both of them. My mother wrote a long message about how I should share my blessings, and how Sarah needs this for her spiritual journey. My father called me selfish and said I was hoarding resources, while my sister was trying to make the world a better place through her healing work. I tried explaining that Sarah could buy her own property if she wanted a retreat space, but they said she couldn't because she's dedicated her life to helping others rather than chasing money. When I pointed out that she charges $200 for energy healing sessions that last 30 minutes, they said I didn't understand the value of spiritual work. The latest development is that Sarah has started a GoFundMe to raise money for what she's calling a sacred mountain sanctuary. In the description, she heavily implies that she already has access to a mountain property and just needs funds to develop it into a healing center. She's posted photos of MY cabin and MY land without my permission. She's raised $3,000 so far from her followers, and in the comments, she keeps talking about how she's working with the current steward of the land, me, apparently, to transition the space to its true purpose. I contacted her and demanded she take down the fundraiser. She refused, saying she's not technically lying because she is working with me. Apparently, her trying to convince me to give her my property counts as working together. She also said the universe will align things properly, and that my resistance to divine will is just my ego trying to maintain control. My parents are fully supporting her. They've donated $500. They've shared her fundraiser on their Facebook pages. When I confronted them about it, they said I was being narrow-minded, and that I should be honored that Sarah wants to use the space for healing work. They keep saying things like, "You have a good job, you can buy another cabin," and "Sarah's work is more important than your need for a weekend getaway." I'm exhausted. I work 50 to 60 hours a week at a demanding job. I bought this cabin with my own money that I saved for years. It's my sanctuary, my investment, and frankly, one of my biggest accomplishments. But I'm being painted as some sort of villain because I won't hand it over to my sister, who thinks she's too evolved for regular employment. I don't know what to do. Sarah is now planning to visit next weekend for what she's calling a land blessing ceremony, and she's invited several of her spiritual community members. I told her she's not welcome, but she says the land has invited her and that my ego-based ownership concepts don't apply to sacred spaces. Am I crazy here? Am I really being selfish by not giving my cabin to my sister who thinks she's spiritually superior to everyone else? Update 1, 2 weeks later. I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your comments helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind and that setting boundaries with my family was not only reasonable but necessary. Unfortunately, things have gotten significantly worse. Despite my explicit statement that Sarah was not welcome at the cabin, she showed up last weekend with 7 of her spiritual community members. I wasn't there. I was in Denver for a work event, but my neighbor Timothy called me Saturday afternoon to ask if I knew there were people on my property. I immediately drove up to find Sarah and her friends had not only entered my property but had somehow gotten into the cabin itself. When I arrived, they were in the middle of what she called a land activation ceremony. They had built a fire pit in my yard, not in the designated fire ring I already have, arranged crystals in circles all over the property, and hung prayer flags between my trees without permission. Inside the cabin was even worse. They had moved all my furniture to improve the energy flow, burned so much incense that the smoke alarms were going off, and, this is what really got me, had set up a makeshift altar on my dining table with photos of Sarah surrounded by crystals, feathers, and what looked like animal bones. I told everyone to leave immediately. Sarah's friends actually looked embarrassed and started packing up, but Sarah refused. She stood in my living room and delivered what I can only describe as a sermon about how I was standing in the way of universal healing, and that my attachment to material ownership was blocking the evolution of human consciousness. When I threatened to call the police, she said, "Go ahead. Explain to them how you're preventing a spiritual healer from doing sacred work on land that has chosen her." I did call the police. 2 officers showed up, and while Sarah tried to explain to them about divine property rights and sacred land choosing its guardians, they told her and her friends to leave or face trespassing charges. As she left, Sarah said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This land will never truly be yours, James. It knows its real guardian, and the universe has ways of correcting these imbalances." I thought that would be the end of it, but the next day, she posted a lengthy Facebook post about how she had been violently removed from sacred land by her spiritually unconscious brother who had called armed forces to suppress divine work. She actually used the phrase spiritual violence to describe me enforcing my property rights. The post went viral in her community. I started getting messages from strangers calling me everything from an enemy of consciousness evolution to a guardian of toxic masculinity preventing feminine healing energy from flowing. Someone found my LinkedIn and started leaving comments on my professional posts about how I'm blocking humanity's spiritual advancement. My parents, instead of being horrified that Sarah broke into my cabin, are taking her side. My mother called me crying, saying I had humiliated Sarah in front of her spiritual community and that calling the police was excessive and cruel. My father sent me a long email with links to articles about sharing economy and communal living, suggesting I was being brainwashed by capitalism to believe in property ownership. They also revealed that they've been giving Sarah money specifically to develop her mountain sanctuary project. When I pointed out that she doesn't have a mountain sanctuary, they said, "Not yet, but the universe is working on providing one." The implication was clear. They expect me to eventually cave and give her the cabin. I've also discovered that Sarah has been telling people she's already conducting retreats at her mountain sanctuary. She's been charging people $500 for weekend spiritual intensives and giving them the address of my cabin. Last weekend when she broke in, those 7 people had actually paid to be there. She's literally running a business using my property without my permission and keeping all the money. When I confronted her about this, she said she's demonstrating to the universe that she's ready to be the land's caretaker and that the money she's raising will go toward improving the sanctuary once the transition of stewardship is complete. She genuinely seems to believe that if she just acts like she owns the cabin, somehow the universe will make it happen. I've had to install security cameras and change the locks. She had somehow gotten a copy of my key. I suspect my parents gave her their spare. I've also had to contact a lawyer about sending cease and desist letters regarding her using photos of my property for her fundraising and advertising these retreats. The lawyer says I have a clear case for fraud and trespassing, but honestly, the thought of taking legal action against my own sister is exhausting. Part of me keeps hoping she'll just stop, but another part of me knows this is only going to escalate. I'm also dealing with the emotional manipulation from my parents. They keep sending me photos of Sarah from when we were kids, talking about how close we used to be and how sad they are that I'm choosing property over family. They've even suggested family therapy, but when I agreed on the condition we use a licensed therapist, not someone from Sarah's spiritual community, they said I was being closed-minded about healing modalities. I feel like I'm going crazy. I worked hard for years to buy this cabin. It's mine. But I'm being treated like a villain for not handing it over to my sister, who thinks she's some kind of spiritual prophet. Update 2, 6 weeks after previous update. The situation has escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. After I installed security cameras and changed the locks, Sarah seemed to back off for about 2 weeks. I thought maybe she had finally accepted reality. I should have known better. 3 weeks ago, I received a formal letter from a lawyer. Not a cease and desist, but a notice that Sarah was challenging my ownership of the cabin based on spiritual adverse possession and divine right of guardianship. Yes, you read that correctly. She's actually trying to legally take my cabin using some bizarre combination of actual property law and what I can only describe as New Age nonsense. The lawyer she hired, it turns out, is part of her spiritual community and apparently believes in her cause. The legal filing is one of the most insane documents I've ever read. It claims that 1. The land has spiritually selected Sarah as its rightful guardian through divine communication. 2. My ownership represents colonial thinking patterns that indigenous spirits reject. Again, she has no actual connection to any indigenous communities. 3. She has been improving the land through energetic cultivation and therefore has established a claim. 4. My rejection of spiritual stewardship constitutes abandonment of the property's true purpose. My lawyer actually laughed when he read it and said it would be thrown out of court immediately. But here's the kicker. My parents are funding this lawsuit. They've given Sarah $15,000 to pursue this legal action because they believe she's fighting for something bigger than property rights. When I confronted them about this, things got ugly. My father accused me of being spiritually bankrupt and said that my success in tech had corrupted my soul. My mother cried and said she was ashamed that her son was so attached to material possessions that he would deny his sister her calling. I asked them point blank, do you really believe that Sarah has a legal right to my cabin because she thinks trees talk to her? My father's response, we believe Sarah has been chosen for important spiritual work and you're standing in the way of something you don't understand. The fact that you mock it just proves how disconnected you've become from what really matters. But the legal filing was just the beginning. Sarah has started what she calls a spiritual occupation of the area around my cabin. She can't get onto my property because of the cameras and new locks, but she's been camping on the adjacent public land and conducting daily ceremonies that involve drums, chanting, and smoke that drifts onto my property. She's also been live streaming these ceremonies to her followers, claiming she's holding space for the land's liberation from capitalist imprisonment. These videos get hundreds of views, and the comments are full of people calling me names and saying I'm an example of how unconscious people hoard sacred spaces. Last weekend, when I went up to the cabin, I found that someone had spray-painted "Sacred Land" on my mailbox and left crystals arranged in patterns all around the perimeter of my property. The security footage showed Sarah and 3 others doing this at 3 a.m. When the police were called, Sarah claimed she was blessing the boundaries and that the crystals were gifts to the land, not vandalism. The local community is divided. Some of my neighbors are annoyed by Sarah's antics and have been supportive. Timothy, the neighbor who first alerted me to her break-in, has been keeping an eye on things and sending me updates. But others, particularly some of the newer, younger residents who are into the same spiritual scene, think Sarah is some kind of hero standing up to property hoarding. There's now a Facebook group called Liberate the Sacred Mountain Sanctuary with over 1,000 members. They share photos of my cabin, taken from public land, discuss strategies for supporting Sarah's divine mission, and organize solidarity ceremonies. Someone posted my work email, and I've been getting dozens of messages a day ranging from New Age word salad about my karma debt to actual threats about what will happen if I don't surrender to divine will. My boss had to get involved when someone called my company claiming I was using tech money to oppress spiritual leaders. Fortunately, my company has been supportive, but it's embarrassing and stressful to have this drama bleeding into my professional life. The financial aspect is also getting worse. Sarah's GoFundMe has now raised over $20,000. She's been using this money not just for legal fees but to fund her occupation. She's rented an RV that she's parked on the public land near my cabin, and she's been paying people to join her in her protests. She calls them spiritual warriors, and gives them $50 a day to participate in ceremonies and live streams. I've had to hire additional legal help, including looking into defamation claims and cyber harassment charges. The legal fees are adding up, and the irony isn't lost on me that I'm spending thousands of dollars to defend my ownership of a property I bought to find peace and relaxation. The worst part is how isolated this has made me feel. Most of my extended family has taken Sarah and my parents' side. My aunt told me I should be grateful that Sarah wants to elevate my property to a higher purpose. My cousins think I'm being stubborn and should just share the cabin. Even some of my friends have suggested that maybe I should just let Sarah use it sometimes to keep the peace. But here's the thing, this isn't about sharing. If Sarah had ever asked to use the cabin for a weekend or even a week for a legitimate retreat, I would have considered it. But she doesn't want to use it, she wants to take it. She believes she deserves it more than I do because she's spiritually evolved, and I'm not. My therapist, an actual licensed therapist, not one of Sarah's spiritual counselors, has been helping me process this. She says what I'm dealing with is a combination of narcissistic personality disorder, Sarah, enabling my parents, and cult-like thinking, the whole spiritual community. She's helped me understand that giving in wouldn't solve anything, it would just reinforce their behavior and likely lead to more demands. I'm holding firm, but I'm exhausted. I haven't been able to enjoy my cabin in weeks because every time I go there, there's some new drama. Last time, I found someone had left an offering of rotting fruit all around my property line to feed the land spirits. The time before that, Sarah had organized a silent meditation protest where 20 people sat just outside my property line in lotus position for 6 hours. I'm prepared to see this through legally, but the emotional toll is significant. I'm angry that my hard work and success are being treated as spiritual failures. I'm hurt that my parents value Sarah's delusions over my actual accomplishments. And I'm frustrated that I can't just enjoy the cabin I worked so hard to buy. Final update, 4 months later. I know many of you have been waiting for an update, and I finally have one that I think brings closure to this saga. First, the legal situation. Sarah's lawsuit was, predictably, dismissed with prejudice. The judge's ruling was scathing. He called it frivolous, without any basis in law, and a waste of the court's time. He also noted that Sarah's claims of spiritual adverse possession were not recognized by any legal precedent in the United States, and that her belief that land can choose its owner belongs in the realm of personal belief, not legal argument. But Sarah didn't stop there. She tried to file an appeal, claiming the judge was spiritually unconscious and therefore unfit to rule on matters involving sacred land. This was also rejected, and she was warned that further frivolous filings could result in her being declared a vexatious litigant. The restraining order I finally filed was granted after Sarah's spiritual occupation escalated. The breaking point came when she organized what she called a full moon reclamation ceremony that drew over 50 people. They blocked the access road to my cabin and several other properties, claiming they were protecting sacred land from exploitation. The police had to be called, and Sarah plus 12 others were arrested for obstruction and disturbing the peace. The video of Sarah being arrested while screaming about spiritual persecution and divine justice went viral, but not in the way she hoped. Most people saw it for what it was, an entitled person having a meltdown because she couldn't steal her brother's property. The comments on the video were brutal, and many of her previous supporters started distancing themselves. Here's where things get interesting. After the arrest, several former members of Sarah's spiritual community reached out to me. They shared stories of how she had manipulated them, taken their money for spiritual services that were never provided, and created a toxic environment where questioning her was treated as spiritual regression. One woman, Jennifer, told me she had given Sarah $3,000 for a spiritual mentorship program that consisted of Sarah sending her copy-pasted daily affirmations and telling her that any problems in her life were due to her resistance to divine flow. Another person, Michael, revealed that Sarah had convinced him to let her stay in his apartment rent-free for 6 months because she was channeling important messages for humanity that required her to not work. These stories gave me the ammunition I needed. I compiled everything, the testimonies, the financial records from her GoFundMe, which several donors were now calling fraudulent, the arrest record, and documentation of her harassment, and presented it to my parents. The conversation was brutal but necessary. I sat them down and showed them everything. At first, they tried to defend her, saying these people were spiritually unready for Sarah's teachings. But when I showed them the financial exploitation, the pattern of manipulation, and especially a recorded conversation where Sarah laughed about how stupid her followers were for believing her made-up ceremonies, something shifted. My mother broke down crying. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but genuine grief. She admitted that they'd been so proud of Sarah for seeming to find her path that they'd ignored red flags. My father, always the more stubborn one, took longer to come around, but when he saw a video of Sarah telling someone that she was more evolved than her parents who were trapped in outdated thinking, something in him snapped. They cut off financial support immediately. Without their money, Sarah's whole operation started falling apart. Her lawyer dropped her when she couldn't pay. The RV she was renting was repossessed. Her spiritual warriors disappeared when the daily payments stopped. The last time I heard from Sarah directly was 2 months ago. She sent me a long email that oscillated between threats, "The universe will punish you for this," manipulation, "I'm your sister, how can you do this to me?" and bizarre rambling about how I had aligned myself with dark forces by choosing material reality over spiritual truth. I didn't respond, but I did forward it to my lawyer to add to the restraining order file. The plot twist came last month. Sarah was arrested again, this time for fraud. Apparently, she had started a new scheme in Arizona, claiming she could heal people's chronic illnesses through quantum energy adjustment. She took thousands of dollars from desperate people, including some with cancer who delayed real treatment to work with her. She's now facing serious federal charges for wire fraud and practicing medicine without a license. My parents are devastated but finally seeing Sarah for who she really is. They've started actual therapy, not the spiritual kind, to understand how they enabled her for so long. Our relationship is slowly healing, though it will take time. They've apologized profusely and even offered to pay my legal fees, which I appreciated but declined. I need them to understand that money isn't the issue. It never was. As for the cabin, it's mine, peacefully and completely. The restraining order means Sarah can't come within 500 feet of it. I've been spending weekends there again, and it's finally the peaceful retreat I always wanted it to be. Timothy and some of my other neighbors have become good friends, and we've actually laughed about the whole situation over beers on my deck. I've learned a lot from this experience. Mainly, that boundaries aren't just important, they're essential. That family doesn't mean accepting abuse or manipulation. And that sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is stay grounded in reality. For those of you dealing with similar situations, here's my advice. Document everything. Don't engage with delusions. Get legal help early. And remember that keeping the peace often just enables worse behavior. Oh, and one more thing. The universe didn't correct the imbalance or provide divine justice like Sarah predicted. What corrected it was the legal system, proper boundaries, and finally standing up to a narcissist who thought she was above both the law and basic human decency. The cabin is still mine. The trees don't talk to me, the creek doesn't have healing powers, and the land hasn't chosen me as its guardian. It's just a nice piece of property in the mountains where I can relax, think, and enjoy the peace I worked hard to earn. And that's more than enough for me. Edit to add, since some people have asked, yes, I'm in therapy to deal with all of this. The trauma of being gaslit by your entire family while being painted as a villain for simply owning property has been significant. But I'm working through it, and having that cabin as a truly peaceful space now is part of my healing. Also, Sarah's legal troubles are ongoing. I won't go into details for legal reasons, but let's just say that claiming you can cure cancer with crystals and charging desperate people thousands of dollars for it doesn't end well when the federal government gets involved. My parents have sent me a letter that they wrote to Sarah, she's in custody awaiting trial, where they apologize for enabling her and said they won't be supporting her anymore, financially or otherwise. Whether she'll ever accept responsibility for her actions remains to be seen, but honestly, that's not my problem anymore. The cabin remains my sanctuary, and I've never been more grateful for it.